3 mysterious deaths in a Florida river confound local authorities. The preliminary investigation reveals little. But when police and the FBI find a sinister link to international drug smuggling, they uncover a conspiracy of unbridled greed and ruthless violence. It's a case that thrusts an entire city into chaos.
In the 1980s, thousands of violent criminals flooded into America from Cuba and Colombia. Drugs hit South Florida, and the area, bloated with illicit wealth, became a violent powder keg. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In the bloody Miami drug wars, the winners got rich, the losers buried, and everyone was a target.
Colombia, South America. Until the 1970s, life was simple but hard. Then, a failed economy gave way to a sharp rise in drug trafficking. The drug trade caused stiff competition that literally began to rip the country apart. Ruthless Colombian drug lords began consolidating their businesses into partnerships known as cartels. Death came to anyone who got in their way. As the cartel's influence grew, so did the American appetite for illicit drugs. And Miami became the prime point of entry for most of the cocaine smuggled into the country. And with it came bloodshed. Colombian assassins were sent to Miami to wipe out the local competition. The homicide rate grew to more than triple the national average for large cities. Miami was named the murder capital of the U.S. Former Metro-Dade homicide detective Alex Alvarez recalls how in 1979, violence came to a Miami shopping mall.
His date of birth is... Several drug traffickers bought out a step van, lined it with bulletproof vests and portholes, and did a drug hit in the parking lot and sprayed it with, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds in the parking lot, trying to kill their intended target.
2 known drug traffickers were killed, and several innocent bystanders were wounded.
There were also incidents of high-speed pursuits on the expressway between 2 drug dealers that were just shooting it out on the expressway during rush hour traffic. And numerous people were being injured and killed. It was like the wild, wild west, so there was a need to try to curb and stop these drug traffickers who seemed to be out of control.
A special squad was formed to deal with the violence. Central Tactical Unit, or CENTAC 26, was headquartered at the Metro-Dade Police Department. Sergeant George Placencia was a detective assigned to the unit, the first of its kind in Miami.
It was a 26th one in the nation. The purpose of forming that task force was that we would go out and monitor all the homicides in Dade County and pick and choose the ones that we thought involved major drug traffickers and attempt to work that angle, the homicide angle, and dismantle the organization.
By the mid-1980s, constant pressure from law enforcement slowly changed the way drug traffickers were doing business in Miami.
They got a little bit more sophisticated. They still did the murders, but not the shootouts in public.
Drug traffickers went deep underground, organizing cells that excluded all but family and close friends. Many cells specialized in activities such as cocaine transportation, distribution, or money laundering. In only a few years, the business had become large and sophisticated, and still very deadly. On the afternoon of July 29, 1985, a marine salvager working on the Miami River noticed something. Off the bow of his boat, floating in the water, was a body. By the time Metro-Dade County Police responded, dock workers had pulled 2 more bodies from the river. The coroner examined the deceased for any signs of trauma or gunshot wounds. He found none. It appeared that the 3 had drowned. On the bodies, officers found beepers, Rolex watches, and plenty of cash. 2 were armed. Essentially, they were all carrying the tools of a drug smuggler. Metro-Dade police called Syntac 26. Sergeant Placencia investigated.
Yeah, hold on, let me write this down. How many people you got over there? We started doing area cams to see if anybody had seen anything suspicious or had seen these individuals prior to them meeting their demise, and that proved to be, not so fruitful at all. Nobody had seen anything.
The 3 victims were identified as local Cuban Americans. 2 had minor police records. The official cause of death was drowning, but there was no indication how they ended up in the water or why. Detective Alex Alvarez searched for a lead in the case.
We began running records checks and contacting the Drug Enforcement Administration to see if these people were known drug traffickers.
Agents at the DEA did not know the men, but they did have a source that could help.
Right. What's the address? They had an informant, and that informant knew the son of one of the dead people that were fished out of the Miami rivers, and it was definitely drug-related. And he was going to put us into contact with the son.
That afternoon, investigators paid a visit to the son.
You know why we're here.
He was willing to tell what he knew, hoping that the mystery of his father's death could be solved.
Can you tell us what you know and how you found out about it?
Well, I know it's a really big business. He brings in thousands.
He told us that his father was one of the biggest drug smugglers in South Florida. He brought in thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of cocaine.
Well, I know last Saturday
He said his father's crew used run-down, steel-hulled vessels to smuggle drugs into the country, since the old boats aroused less suspicion than big yachts.
went out and he hadn't called later
He
on
also
that
detailed how the smugglers built false bulkheads into the boats, concealing hidden compartments filled with hundreds and sometimes thousands of pounds of cocaine. When Customs searched these boats, their only hope of finding drugs would be to use a welding torch.
See, the smugglers are smart. They know that there's no way that Customs and the open ocean is going to put a torch to a boat, because if they're wrong, they'll sink the boat.
Now safely past Customs, the smugglers would continue to move their enormous cargo up the Miami River.
They would park at a marina and then let it sit there for 2 or 3 days to make sure there's no surveillance. And on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th day, when they were convinced there was no surveillance, they'd come at the middle of the night, unload the drugs into vans, and ship them off to different locations within South Florida.
The son said he had been visited by 2 of his father's friends who were on board the ship the night his father drowned. They told him that the boat was raided by a group of gunmen dressed as cops.
So that's where your father was going that night.
The raiders threw the 6-man crew overboard and then stole about 450 kilos of cocaine.
Each kilo at that time was worth approximately $60,000. So the net retail value of this load was approximately $27 million. Now that's not the street value. The street value is probably 2-3 times that.
The Sun provided the names of all 3 men who survived, but said he didn't know how to contact them. The Centac detectives needed to find out if there had been a legitimate raid at the marina. They contacted every law enforcement agency in South Florida that handled drug cases.
None of them had any operations close to the boatyard where this incident happened. So at that time, when I canceled out that this was a legitimate raid, my next focus was, well, these people must have been phony cops, people impersonating police officers, because there was a trend at that time for people to dress up as police officers and raid drug dealers' homes and steal their cash and steal their drugs.
To check the victim's son's story, investigators went to the marina where the raid took place. They interviewed the security guard who had been on duty that night.
How are you?
He said that 7 or 8 men in police uniforms rushed the marina and headed for one of the boats.
They went right past the security guard. The security guard said, being South Florida, there's nothing unusual, you know, go at it.
He hadn't gotten a good look at any of them. Investigators later searched that boat, but found no clues. So they turned their attention to looking for the 3 men who had survived the raid. 2 of the 3 survivors had minor police records, but could not be located at their last known address. The next day, Centac 26 detectives played a hunch. They figured that the survivors would likely be going to the wake for one of the deceased victims.
So we showed up at the funeral home with the names and identities of the people who we were looking for.
The detectives were right. They recognized the survivors from arrest photos and approached the men as they entered. The men confirmed the boat was overrun by a group of raiders dressed like cops.
They're wearing blue uniforms. They had their
But the men denied the boat was involved in drug running. They claimed they were simply having a party.
They had been drinking beer with the 3 victims and 2 additional friends. And while they were there drinking beer and having a good time, people in blue uniforms stormed past the front gate of the marina and started yelling, "Police, police."
The gunmen began assaulting them.
They said several friends were thrown in the water by these individuals dressed in blue uniforms.
Within minutes, all 6 men were overboard in the Miami River. But only 3 swam to safety. The investigation had now become a triple homicide. The Centac 26 detectives were convinced the raid was yet another instance of fake cops ripping off drug dealers.
15-20 minutes.
But again, the survivors denied that drugs were on the boat and insisted they did not know why the men attacked them. They said they didn't see any badge numbers or police cars, couldn't even tell which department the uniforms were from. With no detailed information from the 2 witnesses, the investigators were left without any significant leads. With the case stalled, the FBI offered their assistance. Special Agent Robert Martin.
At about the same time that the homicide investigation began regarding the 3 bodies found in the Miami River, an FBI cooperating witness provided some information to us regarding a group of police officers who were involved in some rip-offs. And he identified who those guys were, at least several of them, knew who some of them were, had conversations with them.
Detective Alvarez got an unexpected call from an agent in counterintelligence.
He says he needs to meet with us, that he has motive and possible information about our case. He put 2 and 2 together, so maybe this is related to this information that I'm getting through my informant, Armando Un. So now we can narrow down.
Armando Un, the FBI agent said, was a well-connected nightclub worker that knew about a group of crooked cops who were ripping off drug dealers along the Miami River. Sentak 26 detectives went to see Armando Un. But he did not want to see them. The interview went nowhere. It would take the murder of a friend before Armando Un would talk. A motorist was driving through the Everglades. He spotted something that piqued his curiosity, a wooden box. He pulled over. To his horror, he found a body inside. He called police. Detectives from Miami-Dade's Drug Task Force, Sentak 26, were investigating the deaths of 3 men found floating in the Miami River. They hoped an informant named Armando Un could help them. His friend and employer had been found murdered in the Florida Everglades. His name was Luis Rodriguez, the owner of a nightclub in Miami's Little Havana district. He'd been shot several times in the head and then stuffed in a box rigged to spring open. A gruesome display. Investigating for Sentak 26 was Detective Alex Alvarez and Sergeant George Plasencia. They needed to get Armando Un to talk.
We never mentioned anything about the 3 bodies. Our ploy in speaking to him was that we were investigating the death of his best friend, the murder of his best friend.
According to Detective Plasencia, Armando Un was very candid.
We sat down and chatted with him for a while about Luis Rodriguez, and he said, yeah, Luis Rodriguez was involved in drug trafficking.
Would you recognize him? Do you know what
He admitted that Rodriguez was dealing drugs out of his nightclub and said he believed the men Rodriguez was involved with killed him.
It is true that he was trafficking drugs.
He was furious that his friend had been murdered and said he wanted to help.
He was making money for everybody. He would
But
give
if
them
he knew
information.
about police officers, real or fake, robbing drug dealers, he said nothing.
He never mentioned that the police officers were involved. He did say that Luis Rodriguez was friendly with some officers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Armando Un seemed wary and selected his words carefully. When the interview ended, the detectives still had no suspects in the Miami River murders. All they really knew was that Luis Rodriguez was dead and may be the 4th drug murder victim in as many days.
So what happened?
Then a City of Miami detective contacted Plasencia and Alvarez with a surprising lead. He said that Luis Rodriguez had also worked for him as a police informant.
He told us that Luis Rodriguez was giving him information about people who were dressed as police imposters and were ripping off drug dealers and committing murders in Dade County.
The detective explained that he had met Luis Rodriguez through a Miami patrol officer named Marco Rivera.
I said, we need your help now. I need you to set up a meeting between the street cop and George and I, and let's tell him that we're investigating Luis Rodriguez's murder. That'll be the cover story.
The meeting was set for that night at the Miami Police Department. Officer Rivera worked the late shift in 60 Sector, police code for Little Havana. He verified that he knew Luis Rodriguez and that Rodriguez had, on occasion, been his informant. But then, without prompting, he brought up the Miami River drownings.
He volunteered some information about the 3 bodies that were floating up in the Miami River. He said that these guys stole the drugs themselves, and when the owner of the drugs found out about it, had them murdered, or they were thrown in the water and drowned themselves, that there was no cops involved at all.
His denial that officers were involved, which no one had mentioned, seemed too forceful.
Can you tell us one more time, Hud? What happened? Go over the
The Sentak 26 detectives tested him.
We asked this patrolman to repeat his story at the conclusion of our meeting, and we detected that the story didn't fit the first story that he had told us. There was something wrong there.
Rivera claimed a street source told him about the raid, so the detectives asked to speak directly with the source.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, just give me a call tomorrow. I'll try to contact him, and if I can't get in contact with him for any reason, I'll let you guys know.
For the Syntec investigators, the case had taken a dramatic turn. This officer, sworn to uphold the law, seemed to be hiding something. The following day, Officer Marco Rivera introduced the detectives to the source who allegedly had information about the Miami River murders.
I don't know if I should even be talking to these guys. I don't even know, bro.
Rivera claimed his source could verify that drug trafficking Colombians had carried out the raid, not Miami cops.
Hey, listen on, man. Hey, listen, we understand that.
But as the source spoke, he had a hard time remembering details of his story. Officer Rivera had to help him remember, according to Detective Alvarez.
The officer keeps having to correct him. No, it happened like this, and tell him about this, and he's filling in the blanks for this guy who's obviously been coached and cued on what to say. So we knew at that point, obviously, he was covering something up.
Officer Rivera's cover-up meant the detectives were faced with an even more serious problem. In case the deadly raiders were actually Miami police officers, they needed to be very careful.
This is a problem that we weren't really trained or focused in to investigate, which is, we're not internal affairs investigators. We don't investigate cops. That wasn't our role. That wasn't our job. But we were charged with the responsibilities of investigating these murders, and if these murders were committed by cops, they were fair play. We realized that if we were going to start to investigate cops, we'd have to do things very differently.
The Syntec 26 detectives had to cover themselves. They asked the police chief to hold their personnel files as a precaution against internal leaks.
We did a lot of things to protect our identity and our family's identity. We took everything that we had in our names and took them out of our names so they couldn't trace where we lived and who we were. We're investigating. They're going to find out who we are. So right away, we built a wall between them and us.
Once they felt safe, Syntec detectives began investigating the officers working the night shift in 60 Sector, Little Havana, Officer Marco Rivera's beat.
Sounds good. Okay.
With the chief's permission, Miami PD's Internal Affairs gave Syntec 26 the personnel records for the officers in question.
Well, the City of Miami Internal Affairs Unit was very concerned. They were very cooperative. The names that we provided to them, they started looking into and giving us the backgrounds that they had on these individuals.
The investigators focused on a close-knit group of 8 officers, all relatively recent hires who joined the force at a time when Miami was in crisis. In the spring of 1980, Cuban President Fidel Castro had announced he would allow thousands of political refugees to seek asylum in foreign countries. The U.S. agreed to accept 3,500. Then, unexpectedly, Castro announced that for the first time in years, he would also allow American boats to enter Mariel Harbor. The result was what became known as the Mariel Boat Lift. More than 120,000 Cuban refugees flooded into South Florida, which overwhelmed Miami's ability to handle them. Most were hard-working immigrants looking for a chance at the American dream. Most, but not all.
10% of them was estimated were criminals that were dumped out of the prison system of Fidel Castro. So there was a spike in the crime wave in Miami-Dade County.
To stem the rising crime rate, the city had to hire over 400 new cadets in 3 years.
Instead of hiring the best candidate, they hired anybody who was just marginally acceptable. They just couldn't find enough quality candidates, and they went for quantity as opposed to quality.
Syntac 26 began surveillance, watching as the officers in question hung out together after hours, enjoying lifestyles far beyond the means of honest police officers. Marco Ribeiro was the suspected ringleader. Armando Garcia had recently become part owner of a bodybuilding gym. Osvaldo Coelho had just retired from the force. He was 30 years old, driving a $100,000 Lotus. It was easy to track their lavish spending.
One officer bought a home and built this pool, and he paid the developer cash, showed up with a bag full of cash and gave it to him here for the purchase of my home.
Still, the detectives had little solid evidence.
Yeah, I'm in front of the restaurant. I don't see any marked units over here. Our boy is definitely over here having coffee with some friends outside, but I don't see any units.
They needed first-hand information, and they needed it soon. If these officers had already left at least 3 people dead, the detectives feared there could easily be more. 4 people had been murdered in Miami over a $27 million drug deal, gone bad. With so much money involved, the dividing line between the criminals and the cops blurred. The FBI offered their assistance to local law enforcement. Special Agent Robert Martin.
We began an investigation which became a joint investigation into whether there was some police corruption in the city of Miami.
Drug Task Force detectives with Syntac 26 had narrowed their investigation to a suspected group of corrupt Miami police officers. But the detectives needed inside information if they had any chance of cracking the case. They hoped they could get it from a reluctant police informer named Armando Un. They had already interviewed Un about the murder of his friend and partner, nightclub owner Luis Rodriguez. He seemed wary, perhaps afraid they too were dirty cops.
Hey, Armando, I want you to look at these photographs, see if you recognize anyone.
Detective George Placencia tried to win his trust by showing photos of their surveillance of the suspect officers.
And he started looking through the photos, and he just paused. He dropped the photographs and shook her hand, and he says, "You guys are doing a good job. Let's sit down and talk."
But unfortunately, these things go wrong.
Un came down to Syntac 26, where he told Detective Alex Alvarez he figured he had nothing to lose.
He was scared. He thought, well, if I stick it out with the crooked cops, they were the ones that probably killed my partner. And he said, well, if they killed him, the next person to go is me.
In a marathon debriefing, he explained the origins of the rogue officers and their criminal enterprise. He said his friend and employer, nightclub owner Luis Rodriguez, had grown tired of the officers coming into his bar and shaking down his patrons for small amounts of drugs.
He wanted to make sure that his customers weren't bothered. So he first started paying the cops off not to come.
And you can maybe get a couple of gram arrests. But
soon he devised another plan that could make everyone some money.
You know, sometimes these things happen. It's just the nature of the business.
According to Un, Luis Rodriguez said to the officers, hey, you know what? Instead of arresting these people that are coming over here with petty drugs, why don't I set up deals, you know, maybe multi-kilo deals, more drugs involved, and when these people come over, I'll give you a description of their car, where they're coming from. You can stop them, steal their cocaine, bring it to me, I'll sell it, I'll give you a share.
The officers agreed.
What made this whole thing possible for these cops was they grew up and knew people who were in the drug trade. And that was the one aspect of what they had going for them.
Patrolman Marco Rivera ran the ripoffs. It seemed a perfect plan. The dealers would never incriminate themselves by reporting the thefts, and Rodriguez would always come through with the cash.
Get in the car. You have a good night now.
Un said the operation grew quickly, with more and more cops becoming involved. But they got greedy, wanting to do more rip-offs and bigger ones.
So the policeman said, okay, it was all good. And it all first began with...
Rodriguez introduced them to a second bar owner who knew of larger shipments.
Luis Rodriguez brought in another bar owner. He knew and he worked smuggling boatloads of drugs into the United States. And Rodriguez says, wait a minute, why stop at these 1 kilo, 2 kilograms of cocaine drug bust? Why don't we go for the boatloads and get 300, 400, 500 kilograms of cocaine at one shot?
Un didn't know about the raid where the 3 men drowned, but he did describe an earlier one the second bar owner had set up. A group of Miami officers had slipped aboard a boat in another marina, thinking the crew had left for the night.
Clear.
They knew exactly where the drugs were hidden. But during the unloading, they noticed the air conditioning was on. And suspected the crew was still on board, hiding. The crewmen surrendered. The raiders wasted no time disposing of the crew, as they had in the other raid. This time, no one drowned. All the men swam safely to shore. The cops finished up, then drove off with about 200 kilos of cocaine, valued at over $10 million. Armando Un confirmed the names of the officers involved, the very ones Sentak had been watching. Unfortunately, the investigators knew his credibility would be attacked in court.
Jury's not going to believe Armando Un, a self-proclaimed admitted drug trafficker, over, half a dozen or a dozen respected police officers. They're just not going to believe it. So we need more evidence.
What they needed was a confession on tape from the very cops they were investigating. They brought in the local bar owner from the drug raids and explained the evidence they had implicating him in the ripoffs. He reluctantly agreed to wear a wire and to meet with Officer Marco Rivera. But he said Rivera had been avoiding him for weeks, no doubt because of the Sentak 26 investigation. They would have to trick him into the meeting. Investigators hoped the results would be worth the risk. Detectives set up in a building across from a bar in the area Rivera patrolled and sent the informant inside. When surveillance units confirmed Rivera was nearby, detectives called 911 and reported a bar fight.
Some officers down to 34th and 8th.
Officer Rivera drove up just as they planned. Rivera entered, looking for the alleged fight, but everything was quiet.
You call the police? You call 911?
The informant made his move.
Hey, man, that's an easy way to get yourself shot.
Just gotta talk to you, man.
What are you doing here?
He told the officer he'd been subpoenaed by the U.S. Attorney's Office and wanted to know what to say. Rivera took the bait, but he didn't want to talk in front of witnesses.
No, but if I let's go.
The corrupt cop spoke freely about his involvement in the drug operation.
So what's the real deal? Why are you worried?
So I can't Joey tell him to yeah, he's dead. He ain't gonna talk. Unless they go in that courtroom with a Ouija board and no one say nothing, okay?
Rivera had no idea everything he said was being recorded. In Miami, investigators pursued a group of rogue police officers suspected of ripping off drug dealers and killing at least 3 of them. The detectives of Centak 26 finally managed to tape an incriminating conversation with the group's leader, Officer Rivera, as he talked about the raids, the drugs, the dirty cops. Detective Alex Alvarez.
It was key evidence because it was the corrupt police officer's own words about what he did, when he did it, and who he did it with.
The U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami reviewed the tapes. Assistant U.S. Attorney Russell Killinger knew they would need as much evidence as possible to convince a jury that several Miami law enforcement officers were behind the murders and thefts. The tapes provided a good start, but Killinger needed more evidence to implicate the other officers. Perhaps Armando Un could get it.
We wanted to get Un wearing a wire and talking to the other cops so that we get those other cops to confirm their own participation out of their own mouths.
Wearing a wire, Un met with Miami officers Marco Ribera and Armando Garcia. He told them that investigators were asking him questions about the boat raids. They warned him not to cooperate. He assured him Centak had nothing on any of them.
Listen, they all over me. They all over me.
They all over everybody. It doesn't matter. They got nothing.
They don't have a damn thing on their face.
I don't want you guys to be seen.
But then they became suspicious, asking him if he was wired. That effectively halted all plans to record any more of the officers. But investigators were undaunted.
We decided to take more of an overt approach in the investigation and go to the next level, which was basically subpoenaing witnesses to the grand juries, issuing bank subpoenas for bank records and financial records.
Investigators began cataloging the assets of the suspects, including Marco Ribera's safety deposit box at a Miami bank. The box contained over $260,000 in cash, nearly 10 times his annual salary. Like Ribera, the other suspect officers left incriminating money trails.
The money was burning holes in their pockets, and they were going out and spending money left and right. They buy $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 cars, cash. They bought homes valued in excess of $200,000, cash. They bought expensive furniture. They put down cash. Now, this is an officer who's making $30,000. We had an enormous amount of evidence.
The financial records, together with the taped conversations, were enough evidence for arrest warrants to be issued.
Suspecting you guys.
2 days after Christmas 1985, Centak 26, Miami PD, and the FBI began the arrests, taking down 6 Miami cops, including the ringleader, Officer Marco Ribera. Officer Armando Garcia was also arrested without incident. Osvaldo Coelho and Emilio Rey surrendered in the following days. The trial began on September 29, 1986. Federal prosecutors thought they had a strong case.
We felt pretty good about the case. We'd gotten pretty much all the evidence in that we had hoped to get in.
Then, on January 21st, 1987, the jury came back with their verdicts.
I remember the judge just kept looking at the verdict forms, and he would look at one and put it down, and look at another and put it down, then pick up the other one and look at it again, and this went on for, it seemed like an eternity. And then he started shaking his head.
The jury was deadlocked, causing the judge to declare a mistrial. One juror had refused to deliberate. Investigators were stunned as all suspects were released.
That was really a low point in the investigation. We found out later, because the 11 jurors that voted for conviction were so convinced that these officers, because of all the evidence, were guilty, they started coming forward and saying, you know, we started getting contacted by friends and family members of these cops offering us jobs and offering us money, and we knew that that was an attempt to try to get us to sway our votes.
The mistrial was an enormous setback. Detectives knew if they could not put these corrupt cops away, the people of Miami may never trust law enforcement again. A group of Miami officers were arrested and prosecuted for corruption, but chaos in the jury room resulted in a mistrial. All suspects were released.
They were thrilled that they weren't convicted. What they didn't realize that it was probably a blessing in disguise for us, because all that did is give us more time, and we were more determined to find out more evidence against them, and that's exactly what happened.
The prosecutor and detectives were unwilling to give up. With so much at stake, investigators needed a break. They finally got one.
We found out that these officers had hired a hitman to kill Armando Un.
That hitman was Killer Joe Martinez. He confessed to being hired, hoping he'd get leniency for another crime he had committed.
We brought him in. He testified against the river cops. We were able to add more charges against them. And by that time, you know, the case was just becoming stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and they had nowhere to go, and then they started to fold and they started to cooperate.
The case finally broke wide open when one of the defendants, Patrolman Emilio Rey, decided to confess. Through his lawyer, he had learned of the additional evidence against him. He hoped for sentencing leniency in exchange for his testimony.
He described to us some fairly bone-chilling conspiracies that had gone on and that were going on in an effort to try to kill the government witnesses.
All of the government's witnesses, especially Armando Un, were in danger. Investigators knew they had to use Patrolman Rey's confession to put more pressure on the other river cops. Facing the beefed-up federal case, ringleader Marco Rivera confessed.
He had implicated some 60 other City of Miami police officers in various criminal activities.
Unfortunately, Osvaldo Coelho and Armando Garcia fled the Miami area. 5 months later, an FBI informant said Coelho was hiding in the Bahamas. The FBI has no formal jurisdiction outside the United States, so it maintains legal attaché offices called legats in many foreign countries. They work as liaisons with each country's national police. The FBI liaison asked the Bahamian police for their assistance. They agreed to help get Coelho. Coelho was wanted for taking part in massive and deadly cocaine rip-offs in Miami. Investigators knew he had a broad network of friends he could ask for help. Coelho called one of them several times to arrange for assistance.
Yeah, I can help you. What do you need?
Okay, I can do that.
Good. See you then.
What Coelho didn't know was that the FBI had already approached the friend, and he was working as an informant. The Bahamian police arrested Osvaldo Coelho without incident. He was extradited back to Miami to face charges of drug trafficking, conspiracy, and racketeering. Armando Garcia was the last of the rogue Miami cops still at large. On January 8, 1989, the FBI added Garcia to their 10 most wanted fugitives list. FBI Special Agent Robert Martin.
We don't pick our top 10 fugitives lightly. They have to be people that we consider to be a serious danger, not only to society, but to the very nature and fabric of what makes our country what it is. And one of those things is honest law enforcement services. Our Garcia was added to the list for that reason.
The FBI had evidence that Garcia may have fled to South America, but had few leads. Special Agent Robert Martin ran the public corruption squad that kept searching for the elusive fugitive.
Armando Garcia was uniquely qualified to understand what it was going to take to survive out of the country. Here was a police officer who knew every technique that we might use to find him or capture him. A guy that knew the difficulties moving in and out of foreign countries and doing investigations in those foreign countries. On top of that, you had a guy that had a lot of money.
Hey, I was just looking at these passports.
Garcia could be anywhere. For 4 years, agents looked into hundreds of leads with negative results.
I'll ask you. Ian, do you have...
Then, in late 1993, the FBI got a tip. A friend was planning to visit the Garcia family in Colombia.
Okay, she didn't have it. I tell you, if you just make that call.
Agents worked with the Colombian police who followed the friend to an apartment in Cali. Agents believed that fugitive Armando Garcia was living there.
The Colombian National Police set up a surveillance with a number of units. It was going to be a 24-hour surveillance, and waited to see if they could identify anybody who had come out or traveled around with her.
Three days later, they spotted Armando Garcia. The fugitive was caught off guard, unarmed.
Hold it, Garcia.
Garcia told them, said, I have $4,000 with me. You see the jewelry I have, you see my automobile, I have goods and belongings in my apartment. You can have all of that if you just let me go. And to quote the Colombian National Police official who came to Miami to describe events, they then told Armando Garcia, we're not the dirty cops, you are.
The last of the main suspects, Armando Garcia pleaded guilty to drug trafficking, racketeering, and tax evasion, and was sentenced to 25 years. When it was all over, 17 Miami officers were convicted for their involvement in the drug rip-off ring. It was the largest police corruption case in Florida history. In response to the scandal, the City of Miami Police Department formed its own internal investigations unit that targeted over 100 additional officers.
They obviously were suffering from all the media exposure and then the embarrassment of having numerous officers arrested, but I think it made them a stronger department. When you weed out the bad officers, it just makes the good officers shine even brighter.
An attempted cop killing, a drug house shootout, and a violent bank robbery. A gang of dangerous criminals threatens an entire community. The FBI and an undercover ex-cop put their lives on the line to track down the gunman.
In the late 1990s, one criminal terrorized an entire community. Witnesses refused to speak out. They knew the consequences could be deadly. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the violence escalated, the FBI worked with local law enforcement to launch a complex sting operation. Their mission? To lure this vicious fugitive out of hiding with the promise of a big score, and to get him off the streets for good.
Camden, New Jersey, located just across the river from Philadelphia. It is one of the poorest, most crime-ridden cities in America. On February 12, 1997, Officer Stephen Leone patrols the street. It's 4:20 a.m. Officer Leone stops to catch up on some paperwork.
I heard a massive amount of gunfire coming from the east side of Camden. Gunfire in excess of 50 rounds. Well, it's not unusual to hear gunfire in Camden, so it's a commonplace thing. And I try to locate a general area before I put out a call for assistance, so we didn't have cops running all over the place.
Officer Leone drives toward the area of the gunshots. The streets are deserted until a suspicious car appears. Officer Leone pulls in behind the car.
Then it appeared that the vehicle saw that I was a patrol vehicle, and they made a left-hand turn. I went down on the seat, and then I came up and I could taste my own blood.
Officer Leone has been hit in the face. Somehow he pulls himself out of his vehicle.
I bailed out of the car to take up a tactical position in the rear of my vehicle in case my assailants attempted to come back or they were still in the area. I knew I was hit. I knew I was hit with a bullet in the face and the head, and I didn't know how serious I was hurt. I radioed an officer down, officer shot, shots fired.
Officer down, officer needs assistance immediately. My location, shots fired.
Within minutes, Camden police and rescue units respond to the scene.
Did you get a description of the vehicle?
Despite his wounds, Officer Leone gives them a description of the shooter's car. Paramedics try to stabilize him for transport to a nearby hospital. The officer has bullet fragments embedded in his face.
I took 3 in the scalp, 1 in my left eye socket, 1 in my right eye socket, and a little piece of my nose. I was lucky I didn't lose my vision.
Paramedics rush Officer Leone to the hospital, while investigators scour the scene looking for evidence. Camden County Prosecutor Lee Solomon.
The idea that somebody would be so brazen, so arrogant, to fire a weapon at a police officer is something that we mobilize against very quickly.
Investigators search the area looking for the shooter's vehicle. Police are called to a house not far from the crime scene. A neighbor heard gunshots earlier that evening.
got a call for shots being fired out here.
They notice the front door is riddled with bullet holes.
I hear something banging in the door.
According to the man, earlier that night, someone tried to break down his front door.
Coming in to get me.
The resident grabbed his gun. The intruders heard him moving in the house and opened fire. The resident returned fire, forcing the attackers to retreat. Police believe the attack was what they refer to as a ninja-style robbery, where masked gunmen invade a house to steal drugs or money. Over 50 rounds are fired into the house.
One of the bullets passed through a wall, a refrigerator, the rear wall of the residence, and the projectile was never found. Another went through a ceiling, floor ceiling, through the roof. Again, the projectile was never found. These were high-powered weapons, and so there was cause for concern.
Later that morning, a few blocks away, police discover an abandoned vehicle.
174.
The car matches Officer Leone's description of the vehicle used in the shootout.
There was broken glass, there was expended shells from the AR-15 and the .45 caliber pistol found in the car. And there was blood in the vehicle.
It was apparent to investigators that one of the perpetrators had been wounded. The officer runs the license plate. The car belongs to a woman who lives in the neighborhood. The canine unit picks up the scent from the car and tracks it to the same address listed on the vehicle registration.
And it was found 2 or 3 blocks from where I was, the location of my shooting was.
A SWAT team prepares to storm the house in case the shooters are still inside.
And there was an elementary school which they closed for the day because they thought there'd be a gun battle with these individuals that were heavily armed.
Inside the house, there is no sign of the gunman. Instead, the SWAT team finds a woman who police discover is the owner of the vehicle.
Who do you think you are? You're not allowed to be in my house. You have Shut up!
They learn that she is the girlfriend of Charlie Rodriguez, one of Camden's most violent criminals. Between 1984 and 1989, Charlie had been arrested for weapons and drug charges as well as making terrorist threats.
Crazy Charlie was known as a guy who would do anything. No violent act was beyond him. Crazy Charlie was the kind of guy that would shoot at a cop, would shoot at an old person, would shoot at a young person, would shoot indiscriminately.
SWAT finds no sign of the gunman. Police search the premises and question the girlfriend.
What's her
What
name?
are you doing in my house?
What's her name?
I don't have any.
She tells them she was at work at the time of the shooting and that she had reported her car stolen. Investigators search the house and find drops of blood. They call for forensics to collect the blood as
Submit
evidence.
evidence tech to collect some evidence, please. Have some blood on the scene.
Okay, we're doing a camera.
Investigators canvass the area, questioning the girlfriend's neighbors. They find someone who remembers seeing a few men leaving the girlfriend's house very early that morning. After looking through a photo lineup, he identifies one of the men. According to police records, the suspect is Jose Baez, on parole for manslaughter and weapons violations. Police track Baez to an apartment in Deptford, New Jersey. The dangerous ex-con is investigators' only link to a would-be cop killer. A violent rampage in Camden, New Jersey results in the shooting of a police officer. Evidence leads investigators to Jose Baez, an ex-con they believe was involved in the shooting. Baez is quickly taken into custody.
Turn around.
Investigators notice the suspect has a wound on one of his hands.
He recently sustained some type of bullet wound to his hand that he tried to sew up using thread himself.
Police arrest Baez for parole violations and take a sample of his blood for DNA testing. In the lab, Baez's blood is compared to evidence gathered in the Leone shooting.
And they were able to match the blood from him to the blood found on the scene, in the vehicle and at the house.
Investigators now have proof that Baez was in the car at the time Officer Leone was shot. But they don't have evidence to suggest that he actually pulled the trigger. At first, Baez refuses to talk to authorities. But after 2 weeks in custody, he asks to meet with the investigators.
Jose, you already been read your rights, so I have to go over that with you. I'm an investigator with Camden County, and I'm trying to figure out information about the shooting.
Baez finally agrees to talk, but only if police take steps to protect his family. He says that Charlie Rodriguez, Crazy Charlie, was involved in the ninja robbery as well as the Leone shooting.
I believe that Baez ultimately cooperated because Charlie had threatened his family. And out of fear that something might happen, he had cooperated.
The Camden County Prosecutor's Office obtains a warrant on Charlie Rodriguez for the attempted murder of a police officer. They also offer a $1,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. The state of New Jersey places Charlie Rodriguez on the top 10 list of wanted fugitives.
There was a manhunt every day. Every Camden cop and every cop in Camden County was looking for Charlie Rodriguez.
Although Charlie is well known throughout Camden, residents are too afraid to talk to police.
Fear is a powerful weapon for somebody like Charlie Rodriguez.
In the month following Officer Leone's shooting, police question their informants. All they learn is that Charlie is hiding somewhere across the river in Philadelphia. Since Charlie is believed to have fled to another state, local police turn to the FBI for help. FBI agent John Tam obtains a federal warrant and leads a multi-state hunt for Charlie Rodriguez.
I start by getting good photographs, reviewing his prior criminal records, and I also review prison records to see who their cellmates were, who visited them while they were in prison, and attempt to identify people they might be in contact with.
FBI agents cast a wide net. But like local police, the FBI find that people are too terrified to talk.
Charlie Rodriguez's reputation was of a stone-cold killer. People were very cautious about talking about him.
Agents set up surveillance on Charlie's girlfriend, hoping she will lead them to Charlie.
Rodriguez had enough self-discipline to stay away from her and keep her away from him, so that wasn't helping us either.
Over the next few months, agents continue to question their informants and learn that Charlie is hiding in a tough Philadelphia slum known as the Badlands.
A very tough neighborhood, a lot of drug activity, difficult to police. People live there intimidated by the criminals. It's a hard place to find a fugitive because you get very little cooperation.
FBI SWAT teams raid buildings in the Badlands where Charlie is believed to be hiding.
We get the fugitive task force out over in Philadelphia, 5 in the morning. We'd hit the place, we'd catch somebody. They would be a criminal, but it wouldn't be Charlie Rodriguez. You know, we'd end up arresting somebody who was wanted for something else.
Let's go.
At the same time, on the crime-ridden streets of Camden, the FBI is running an unrelated drug investigation. And Special Agent Jim Walsh gets an unexpected tip.
We obtained information that Charlie Rodriguez and his brother Joseph and some other individuals were planning to commit a bank robbery or a robbery of an armored car in the near future.
Joseph Rodriguez, he had previously been convicted of murder and an infamous drug shooting that occurred in the early 90s, where 2 teenagers were killed on a drug corner in South Camden.
According to an informant, Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are targeting one bank in particular in the nearby town of Woodland, New Jersey. Agents set up surveillance teams. If the Rodriguez brothers hit the bank, local police are nearby ready to make the arrest. But weeks pass with no sign of the robbers.
Due to manpower needs, we couldn't sustain the surveillances. And after about a month and a half, we had to discontinue them.
On July 19, 1997, a few weeks after the FBI ends surveillance, several heavily armed men hit the Woodland Bank. One teller is too frightened to move. Two of the robbers forced the teller to empty the cash drawers. The remaining robber guards the lobby and calls out how much time has passed. One robber tries to force the supervisor to open the vault. She tells him she can't. The vault is on a timer. He tells her if she doesn't open the vault, he will kill her. In New Jersey, the shooting of a Camden police officer launches an FBI manhunt for a violent ex-con named Charlie Rodriguez. 5 months later, 3 men carrying semi-automatic weapons burst into a bank in Woodland, New Jersey. The bank supervisor can't open the vault. It's on a timer. One of the robbers threatens to kill her. The robbers are out of time. They have to leave before police arrive. The bank supervisor escapes with her life. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh investigate the robbery. The customers and the bank employees are terrified. Special Agent Jim Walsh.
All the individuals were upset. One woman had to be taken to the hospital. She was so scared she suffered a minor heart attack.
Can you describe any one of them?
Because the violent nature of the bank robbery. I knew immediately that it was Charlie Rodriguez and his brother.
Agents and police watch the bridges to Pennsylvania and the New Jersey Turnpike for the Rodriguez brothers. They find no sign of them. At the FBI office in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Agents Walsh and Tam study surveillance photos and footage from the bank's security cameras, looking for clues. Special Agent John Tam.
We got a good look at the weapons they were carrying, which were semi-automatic rifles, what is known as an AR-15. It's a very dangerous weapon because standard law enforcement body armor will not stop that round.
Although agents feel confident the robbers are Charlie and Joey Rodriguez, they cannot positively ID them from the surveillance.
You could not identify them in any way. They were fully clothed. They had gloves on, masks, hats.
Joey Rodriguez continues to live openly in Camden. The FBI doesn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Agents watch Joey, hoping he will lead them to Charlie.
He realized that he was the connection, if there was any, to his brother, and they stayed away from each other.
Over the next 7 months, the Camden, New Jersey area is plagued by a string of bank robberies. The Rodriguez brothers are possible suspects, but police have no hard evidence to link them to the crimes. Moorestown, New Jersey. A two-bedroom community north of Camden. May 23, 1998. More than a year after Officer Leone is shot, 3 men arrive at a Moorestown bank just before 8:30 a.m. They all carry assault rifles or machine pistols. The bank's doors are still locked. The robbers have lost precious time. They realize a bank employee has probably triggered the silent alarm. 2 of the robbers force tellers to empty the cash drawers. A third gunman guards the lobby and calls out how much time has gone by. The robbers are tense. They decide the tellers are moving too slowly. The robbers frighten a late arriving teller. The getaway car won't start. The robbers panic. They threaten the teller, demanding her car keys. They escape in her car. Based on the robbers' MO, agents Tam and Walsh decide that it was probably the Rodriguez brothers.
Same builds.
Surveillance photos from the robbery provide even more clues. The weapons, masks, and even some of the clothing look identical to those used in the Woodland Bank robbery.
The pictures prove that they were, in fact, similar type clothing worn.
But the 2 agents lack enough evidence to charge either Rodriguez brother with bank robbery. The gang's MO seems to be evolving. With each robbery, they are becoming more dangerous.
The violence of this group was escalating. Eventually, somebody was going to be killed. Either a bank employee, a customer, or a police officer responding to a report of a bank robbery. There's no question somebody was going to be killed.
Agents Tam and Walsh meet with the local law enforcement agencies in the cities and towns in the Camden, New Jersey area, advising them of the gang's MO. In late July 1998, Agent Tam gets an intriguing lead from Lieutenant Roy Whitmore at the Merchantville, New Jersey Police Department.
I know an individual who may be able to help us. I know a gentleman.
He said, I have an individual who grew up with Rodriguez and who knows his brother fairly well, who might be willing to locate Crazy Charlie Rodriguez.
A year and a half into the investigation, the FBI has the potential to develop an informant with access to information about Charlie Rodriguez.
It was the biggest break possible because we had been looking essentially in the blind for somebody to cooperate with us and give Charlie Rodriguez up. Lieutenant Whitmore arranged for me to meet this person and formulate a way to draw Charlie Rodriguez out from wherever he was hiding in Philadelphia.
The informant is a former police officer who was forced to resign due to a minor weapons infraction.
Well, I found him to be intelligent, surprisingly articulate, considering that he was from a very tough urban environment. And I felt him to be honest and reliable.
The ex-cop says he wants to stop Charlie before anyone else, especially a police officer, is shot or killed.
We talked about his relationship with Joseph Rodriguez.
The agents theorize that Joseph is somehow in contact with his brother so they can plan robberies.
I suggested maybe he could find out something from Joseph as to if he ever saw his brother, was in contact with him, how he contacted him, and the frequency of the contact, because maybe we could take advantage of that to locate Charlie Rodriguez.
Agents Tam and Walsh develop a plan to use their informant to lure Charlie out of hiding. They know that the ex-cop used to sell guns.
He had worked for a firearms dealer, and that was known on the street in South Camden.
But now the ex-cop is legally barred from owning or selling firearms. The agents decide to use the informant's background to help establish his cover.
He would go to Joseph Rodriguez and ask him if he was interested in buying a handgun. We felt this would be a good introduction that he wanted to now enter the criminal element.
I knew that that would interest Charlie Rodriguez because of his violent criminal nature. Criminals are always interested in acquiring new weapons. They can get rid of whatever weapon they've used before and move on to another one not connected with their prior crimes.
The ex-cop agrees to approach Joey at a family gathering a few days later. At first, Joey is wary.
Joseph knew that he had been a police officer and that he had been let go from the department, and he used this as an introduction. I was wrongly fired, they screwed me over, and heck with law enforcement.
Let's go join the party.
A few days later, Joey contacts the ex-cop and arranges a meeting.
He said, yeah, I talked to Charlie about it, and Charlie's interested in buying the handgun.
Not long at all. I'll call you.
So we knew we were making progress, and we knew that Charlie Rodriguez was nearby.
Agent Tam tells the undercover ex-cop that they need him to meet Charlie face to face.
Joseph Rodriguez would be very happy to buy the gun and then give it to Charlie Rodriguez, but that wouldn't help us. So I emphasized to him at that point that he was going to have to hand deliver the weapon to Charlie Rodriguez, where we could arrest him.
The FBI has no intention of actually delivering a working gun to either Rodriguez brother. The ex-cop goes to Joey's apartment to try to set up the sale.
The source was taking tremendous risks. He would have been killed immediately, in my opinion, if Charlie or Joey Rodriguez found out that he was cooperating with us.
Camden, New Jersey, 1998. An ex-cop embarks on a dangerous undercover operation for the FBI. Charlie Rodriguez, also known as Crazy Charlie, is suspected of shooting a police officer and robbing banks. The ex-cop attempts to infiltrate Charlie's crew by offering to sell him guns. The undercover informant meets with Charlie's brother. Joey Rodriguez, an ex-con who has served time for manslaughter, checks to see if he is wired.
He did not wear a recording device or anything because we were afraid if that was found, he would be immediately killed.
Slowly but surely, through a series of meetings, the ex-cop wins Joey's trust. The undercover informant tells FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh that Joey even asked him for advice on an upcoming robbery.
I said, that's a good idea. Tell them that you're interested in participating. And I thought maybe that would give us more information about where they were, you know, where they might be meeting, and we could interrupt them before they really got the whole thing going.
The ex-cop adds that Charlie Rodriguez is looking for a big score this time, $100,000 or more.
I said, well, then we're going to suggest a crime for them to commit. They want to rob somebody, we're going to give them a target to rob.
Agents Walsh and Tam plan a sting operation to lure Charlie Rodriguez into the open without endangering the public.
The key thing is believability. The criminal has to believe the scenario. There's going to have to be money, there has to be opportunity, there has to be a plausibility that the crime can be committed. I suggested we would have them rob an armored car servicing an automatic teller machine on the New Jersey Turnpike, because this would give us an environment where we could seal off a rest stop where the ATM was located and catch them there.
Agents Tam and Walsh pick a location they feel will work well.
And we selected a rest stop located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The rest stop was located below the grade of the surrounding community. So if there was any gunfire or anything like that, the rounds would tend to be shot into a hill as opposed to flying all over the place.
The big thing for us was we felt that it was in a place that we could secure and control.
The undercover man pitches the robbery proposal to Joey, who carefully evaluates his every word.
He was able to go back to Joseph Rodriguez and say, I know this armored car driver who's willing to cooperate with us. And the armored car driver had significant sports betting debt, gambling debt, and that he wanted to be cut in on the proceeds of the robbery.
The undercover ex-cop says the armored car driver will be their inside man and hand over more than $200,000.
Well, it may just come to that. So?
2 days later, Joey gets back to the ex-cop with an answer.
Joseph Rodriguez said, Charlie thinks it's a great idea. Let's go ahead with a plan and do this.
Joey says he wants to check out the rest area with a third person.
Who's that? A friend of mine.
The ex-cop is concerned by the sudden change in plans.
Joey says, don't worry about him. He's okay. You can trust him.
The newcomer's name is Jose Soto.
Soto had an extensive and violent criminal record. He'd also been convicted of second-degree murder and was out on parole. And they drove to the rest stop and basically checked it out to see if they would be able to pull off this robbery.
The rest area has a back service road. It will allow them to enter and leave the rest stop without ever going onto the turnpike.
They knew they could get away and probably not be seen by anybody. The robbers liked everything about the location. And the FBI liked everything about the location because it was going to allow us to isolate them in an area where they could not escape and where the public generally would be protected from any sort of firearms activity, any sort of gunshots or anything that might occur.
Joey drives around the rest stop, tracing the route the armored car will take as it approaches the ATM.
Joseph Rodriguez was familiar with the location and comfortable with it. So rather than having the cooperator have to sell it to Charlie Rodriguez, Joseph Rodriguez sold it to him for us.
The undercover informant tells the FBI that Charlie Rodriguez, the target of the sting, has approved the robbery for August 27th. With the plan now in motion, the FBI approaches the agency responsible for the turnpike and the rest area, the New Jersey State Police. Agent Tam briefs Lieutenant Colonel Robert Dunlop. Dunlop's troopers will shut down the entire area and the turnpike to protect the public.
We always have the news helicopters up in the air. Radio stations would have broadcasted that there was a backup on the turnpike. To make this thing work, we had to coordinate this where we would shut this rest area down just moments before our suspects arrived, so it wouldn't spook anyone.
SWAT teams will be positioned at the turnpike entrances and inside buildings in the rest area. 3 days before the sting, Tam and Walsh meet with FBI and police SWAT leaders to go over the plan to capture the Rodriguez brothers in Soto.
We knew they were going to be heavily armed, and we knew that, at least in the case of Charles Rodriguez, they had a propensity to shoot people when confronted.
The plan is to evacuate the rest area minutes before the Rodriguez gang arrives. The FBI's informant will park behind the rest area, but then walk to the front of the building to get out of the line of fire.
Yeah, we're just talking about right now what we're going to be doing.
The SWAT team will be hidden inside a delivery truck. For backup, snipers will be positioned on a rooftop.
A tow truck would come down the access road driven by an FBI agent, and he was planning on pinning the car with the Rodriguez brothers in it at that location where they could not pull the car out.
Once the gang is trapped, the SWAT team will make the arrest.
The plan was a good one in the sense that if they had a lick of sense, they would surrender.
August 27th, 1998. Agents and state police assemble at the rest area.
Check, roger that.
The trap is set.
5 in position. Check.
Crazy Charlie is considered a very dangerous and unpredictable criminal. I think everyone that was involved in this operation knew that there was a great possibility that he wouldn't go down easy. As much as we planned, there was always the possibility that he would want to shoot it out.
Camden, New Jersey. Charlie Rodriguez is suspected of wounding a police officer and robbing banks. August 27th, 1998. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh have devised a complex sting operation to trap the dangerous fugitive and his crew. Nearly 100 agents and law enforcement officers are in position at a New Jersey rest stop. But Charlie and his crew fail to show.
We're wondering where we had gone wrong. Had they found out something about it? Do they now suspect the source?
The agents are concerned about their informant, an ex-cop who helped them infiltrate the Rodriguez crew. If Charlie Rodriguez knows he's been set up, he could kill the FBI informant.
Early that morning, I get a call from the cooperator. He tells me that the Rodriguez brothers, who were to meet him at his apartment in Merchantville, New Jersey, had not arrived.
We instructed the source to reach out for Joey Rodriguez and find out why they hadn't showed up.
Despite the danger, the FBI's undercover man agrees to talk to Joey.
Where were you yesterday?
Joey says that the day before, sheriffs came looking for one of the crew, Jose Soto.
We were this close.
The undercover man informs the FBI about the problem.
The county sheriff's department had a warrant for Jose Soto for failure to pay child support. So that had kind of spooked them, and they decided not to go forward with it.
Agent Walsh asks deputies to tell Soto that all they want from him is a promise to pay his child support.
That's right.
The Rodriguez brothers and Soto are relieved. The next day, Joey meets with the ex-cop near the Ben Franklin Bridge to tell him Charlie has chosen a new date for the robbery, September 1st. The FBI sting operation is back on. According to their insider, Charlie and the crew are now supposed to arrive at his apartment early in the morning of the robbery. All of them will drive to the rest stop together.
There was some consideration to arresting him at the apartment. However, the SWAT team leaders felt that it was not as safe an environment as the rest stop because there were other people living in the apartments above and on either side.
The apartment complex was next to a playground and an elementary school. The whole environment would be awful for a violent arrest. So we wanted to get them out of there.
It was agreed upon that we would go with the original plan and it would take place at the rest stop.
The morning of the robbery, the FBI's undercover man waits at his apartment for the crew to arrive.
Up to this point, Charlie Rodriguez had not showed up. The source had not yet seen or met Charlie Rodriguez during all this.
He finally gets to meet with Charlie face to face.
Charlie, it's good to finally see you.
Can I get something to eat?
What do you want? Donuts.
The source has an opportunity to go outside to get orange juice and donuts to bring back to them.
He takes the opportunity to call Agent Tam. The robbery is going forward as planned.
Yeah, they're in the apartment. It's definitely a go.
At the apartment, the crew puts on bulletproof vests and checks their weapons. The FBI's inside man puts on a distinctive baseball cap.
We had him wearing a baseball cap that everybody would recognize so that they would know that he was the cooperator.
The robbers leave for the rest area in 2 stolen cars. FBI surveillance keeps agents informed of the robbers' location so they can evacuate the rest area before they arrive.
We shut down both the rest area and the turnpike within a 10 to 15-minute time period.
The undercover man parks one of the stolen cars in a nearby neighborhood to use as a getaway car after the robbery. He then drives the Rodriguez brothers and Soto down the back road toward the rest area. Already there, FBI agents prepare for the sting.
I knew this was going to be a very dangerous operation. The source was going to be put in danger, plus a lot of agents and law enforcement personnel.
My concern was, do we not have anybody seriously injured or killed during this operation? We're just trying to arrest these people with the least amount of injury to anyone.
The FBI SWAT team waits inside a delivery truck.
We had FBI snipers on the rooftop of the rest stop in the event they got out of the car and tried to run away or fire at agents or anyone.
Nearly 100 law enforcement officers are hidden in and around the rest area.
Doesn't matter how many of these operations you've been on, there's always an adrenaline rush just prior to. What's going through my mind is that I hope we don't have gunfire. I hope no one's injured. I hope that we can take these people down without any serious problems.
The FBI's informant drives the crew along a back road into the rest area.
And the source parked exactly where he was told to park.
And our plan was to disable their vehicle by ramming it with a tow truck, which would probably knock the firearms out of their hands, and then they would be confronted by the SWAT team.
The FBI agent in the tow truck waits for the go-ahead signal, the undercover man leaving his car.
The main concern of this whole plan was getting the source out of the car, the safety of the source. And once he got out of the car, I felt everything would be fine.
But before the FBI source can get out of the car, Charlie senses that something is wrong. The informant's cover is in jeopardy of being blown. A wrong move now could cost him his life.
You want to ride in the trunk or you want to drive the car?
At a rest area in New Jersey, the FBI launches a sting operation to catch a gang of dangerous bank robbers. Gang leader Charlie Rodriguez senses a trap. He forces the driver of the car, an FBI cooperator, back into the car, preventing an FBI SWAT team from moving in. The undercover man is trapped. Agent Tam makes a difficult decision.
So I tell the SWAT team to go ahead and execute their secondary plan, which was the takedown. And that also involved the tow truck ramming the car.
The tow truck drives around to pin the robber's car.
As the tow truck approached, Charlie told the source, "Something's wrong here. This is a setup. Let's get out of here."
Needing to protect his identity, the FBI's undercover man speeds away from the SWAT team. One of the gunmen tries to shoot at the agents. The SWAT members open fire.
When the gunfire erupted, I think all of us in the back of our minds were saying, I hope we don't end up hitting our confidential source.
The tow truck slams into the rear end of the getaway car.
When it was finally over and we had these people safely in custody, I think everyone felt a tremendous amount of relief and satisfaction that it went down well.
Incredibly, the undercover man has not been wounded. FBI agents recover a huge arsenal of weapons from the Rodriguez brothers in Soto.
The amount of weapons and the amount of ammunition that was recovered from inside this car was something that I have never seen or heard of before. It's more firepower than would be necessary to rob 1,000 banks.
The weapons included an AR-15 converted to automatic, a machine pistol with a silencer, and an AK-47 Chinese clone also converted to automatic. Each of the gunmen also carried sidearms with the serial numbers drilled out and dozens of fully loaded magazines. Altogether, they had well over 1,000 rounds of ammunition.
Charlie Rodriguez made a remark that if he had known what was going to happen, he would have brought his hand grenades. For them to actually have been arrested without anyone getting hurt with the kind of ammunition and the kind of weapons that they had in their person was an incredible feat.
The Rodriguez brothers were violent criminals. I mean, they'd killed before, they would kill again. And the only solution to that is to lock them up forever, which was the ultimately what happened here.
On March 30th, 2000, Jose Soto was sentenced in federal court to 37 years for the attempted armored car robbery and weapons violations. Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are sentenced to life without parole for 2 bank robberies, the attempted robbery of an armored car, and weapons violations.